Clemson versus Georgia, potentially in the matchup of the weekend. Let's talk about the position battles and then get into a prediction. For starters, the war in the trenches. On Georgia, you've got Tate Rutledge and Ernest Green leading that offensive line, and they're going up against Peter Woods and Barrett Carter in the run game and in the pass rush. That is going to be a pivotal matchup. Whether or not Clemson can hold Georgia's run game down is one of the biggest questions of this game, and it's going to be determined on how Peter Woods goes up against Tate Rutledge. I'd like to give the edge to Rutledge, especially because he's more experienced, but all that being said, Peter Woods is one of the best defensive tackles in football. On the other side of things, you've got Tristan Lay and Walker Parks on Clemson's offensive line versus Mikael Williams and Nazir Stackhouse. That, to me, is a matchup that Clemson has more favor in. I still give the edge to Georgia, but overall, it seems like these matchups might not be completely equal, but they're much closer than people want to admit, I guess. So next thing I want to talk about is the skill position group. First, Clemson loses Will Shipley to the draft. That was a major part of their offense last year. And then on top of that, Georgia loses Roderick Robertson to injury. And then Trevor Etienne was arrested on DUI charges earlier in the year. It is very questionable as to whether or not he's going to play this first game. If not, Georgia will be without their first running back and their second running back. On top of that, their 4 out of their top 5 pass catchers last year were drafted. They're gone, either drafted or graduated. What Georgia has in the skill position group is just basically a massive question mark. This is where the quote-unquote Bama reload comes into play. Does Georgia have the talent, the depth to reload after losing so much talent on the offensive side of the ball, specifically at tight end with Brock Bowers? I'm thinking that they do. Obviously, Kirby Smart is a great recruiter and has brought in tons of talent, but the question still exists. Can they perform game 1 versus a top 25 opponent? I think that they can, but if they wouldn't or if they don't, I would not be shocked. Next thing I want to talk about is Cade Klubnik. Is he ready to take the step that he did not take last year? In Clemson's 4 losses, he had 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 62% completion percentage, and about 250-ish yards per game. So not a bad performance at all, but not a performance that will win Clemson football games, which is what they need him to do. He has to be the deciding factor for this offense. Yes, they have good wide receiver talent. Yes, they have a decent running back group, but they don't have any quote-unquote X factors, and Cade Klubnik was promised to be that. He's got to do that game 1 versus Georgia. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is, can Clemson establish the run? A lot of people were hating on Clemson last year, and justifiably so. They went 8-4, and they were 4-4 in their first 8 games. But in their last 5 games, they won all of them, and they averaged 204 yards on the ground per game. That's 50 more than they were averaging in their first 8 games, and I think that's really impressive. Now, the big question is can they do that versus the Georgia Bulldogs? That's a TBD. I have my doubts, my serious doubts, just because Georgia is always so talented on offense. What I think makes the difference is if you look at Georgia and who they struggle against year in and year out, dual threat quarterbacks. Their 2 losses in the last 3 years versus Bryce Young and Jalen Milroe. Now, Bryce Young's not the most mobile, but he can escape the pocket, unlike Cade Klubnik, and I think that's probably the difference maker in this game. Now, let's go ahead and get into my prediction here. I think this is going to be a pretty low-scoring affair. I don't think either offense is off the charts talented or ready to go week 1. I don't think that either defense is, that overpowered over the other. I think they're pretty equal, but Georgia wins the matchups on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think that's the difference maker. I think that they're going to cover this 13-point spread, and towards the end of the game, it's going to get kind of ugly. My final score prediction, 38-10. The first half will be much closer than the second. I think once you get an SEC team rolling, it's hard to stop them. I mean, you've seen this matchup multiple times throughout the years. I mean, Georgia played Oregon a couple of years ago. People expected that to be relatively close, but they blew them out 63-3 or something like that. I don't think it'll get that ugly. But if you go back and look at these old ACC, SEC matchups with Alabama and Virginia Tech and Alabama and Clemson, the matchup pretty much adds up here. 38-10 is my final prediction. We will see. I don't think this will be the game of the weekend, but I definitely think it'll be one that's worth watching because we want to see how Georgia stacks up against the top 25 team early on because they are a national title contender. So thanks for watching. We're going to do a few more. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.